Hello, thanks very much for joining me again. Welcome to this video, which is about our cleaver set. Now, already in our range we have a mini cleaver. Some people might use it for cheese, something like this, and now we have a large cleaver. The size of it, it's around about 120 mils across from tip to tip there. The tang is around about 10 mils, and it comes with two of the bits, a ferrule, which is here, and I've covered these before, but this is quite a large ferrule. It's about 20 mils long and it's about 19 mils in diameter, I think. All the details are on the website, and it also comes with one of our little stainless steel end caps, which of course makes this a turn between centres kit. You don't have to turn it between centres. If you don't want to use the end cap, you can find another way of holding the handle when you turn it, but by far the simplest is to use the little end cap, because it does two things. One is it enables you to turn between centres, and the other is it makes it look like it's one solid piece of metal that goes all the way through the handle. So it's a little bit deceptive to look at, but it does serve a purpose. So what I'm going to do, as I've done on quite a few of our other kits, is turn a handle for this one between centres on the lathe. I've got a variety of bits of wood. I've got some laburnum. It's hellishly hard. I'm not quite sure if it's going to be suitable or not. So before I do that, what we need to do, as I recommend with all kits, is to measure the parts yourself to make sure you're happy with them. So what you need to do is measure this tang and decide, depending on what you're going to make the handle with, exactly the size drill you're going to use for this. Now, I mentioned laburnum, it's exceptionally hard, so I'm not going to get this tang to cut very much into that wood. So the width of this is going to have to be very, very similar to the hole needs to be very similar to the width of the tang. If, as an example, you're using acrylic, then you'll need to make the hole for that's used for the tang, you'll need to make it pretty much the same size as the tang, because acrylic won't budge, it won't move. If you force this into a piece of acrylic, it'll just split it and break it, and then that would have to be glued. But if you have a softer wood, like each piece of wood is different, but as an example, beech or maybe even a softwood, you can actually reduce the size of the pilot hole you make for the tang, because it will force itself into the fibres. Now, it's not something that we can give measurements for, because, as I've just said, every piece of wood is different, and this is really down to the skill of the wood turner to decide what they're going to do. But I'm going to have to be pretty close to this if I'm going to use the laburnum handle. Anyway, I shall go and get that blank that I fiddled around with this morning and found in the scraps bin, and see how we get on with it. The first thing I've done with my blank is mark the centres at each end and make sure I've got the centre. I'm just using this live centre just to centre it up before I drill the holes. So the first hole I'm going to drill at this end is a 9.5mm hole for this particular piece of wood. I'm using a centre finder, about 700 RPM, just to put the starting hole into the blank. What I'm doing now is measuring the tang on here. It's just over 10mm wide, and the depth is just under 30mm, so we need to drill 30mm in, and the 9.5mm drill. Please measure your kit. The specifications change, and we don't do a new video if we have a slightly different model with a different tang size. So I'm now checking the size in there. I can push it in a little bit. It's going to take quite a hammering when I've finished this handle to get that tang inside. But I'm quite happy to do that because I have a rubber mallet and I'm going to use the stainless steel cap on the other end. So I'm now aligning the other end up with the center mark that I put in. And I've got another, I don't think the camera will quite pick up at this angle, another centre finder, but a smaller centre finder because the hole I need to cut at this end is much smaller for the end cap. Right. If I tighten that up, let's just double check. I thought I saw a bit of movement. I think it's okay. So again, I've got my little end cap and my calipers. I'm going to just measure to make sure I get the right size. This one's 4.9 millimeters, so I'm going to drill a 5mm hole. It'll need to be glued in this, but I would recommend gluing both ends anyway. It's a kitchen gadget, so you want to make sure you don't get water down the holes when it comes to assembly, but we'll come to that in a bit. So 5mm drill hole up this end. Right, I'm now going to cheat because what I've done is go to my drill set, which is underneath here, and the one that's missing is 5mm. I've measured my centre finder here. It's actually 4.8mm, so I'm just going to use my centre finder and see if that is good enough to do the job, which we'll see. It doesn't have to be very deep because it's not very long for the end cap. Might mean I can tap it in instead of right, I think I might be able to tap that in, but I'm not going to do it at the moment anyway because I'll get it stuck. Right, just a little tip now. Quite often I turn between centres and I use a dead centre. That's one of these up in the headstock here and a live centre in the tailstock. What you can get with these things sometimes is you'll get some slippage on here because it doesn't grip particularly well. It's nice and accurate to turn on, but you need to be really tight on there. So another tip you can do is just get a scrap of wood, put it in your chuck, turn it to a point and use that as your dead centre, the headstock end. So that's what I'm going to do today, for two reasons. Partly because this thing is so hard and I've got a sneaky suspicion it's going to be very hard to turn, and secondly because you get just a little bit more resistance with wood on wood. It can burn, but if you get it tight it just holds it just slightly better, and of course you've probably got lots of scrap, so you can find one of these bits. The one thing you must do every time you put it into there, you must recut it to recenter it, otherwise you'll get movement on it. So that's what I'm going to do now. Put my dead centre away and just pop my scrap in the chuck there. So as you probably saw, I had a slight stall there. This wood is extraordinarily hard, but the next thing that I need to do is the ferrule. Forgive the noise, obviously we're going to get tractors and traffic all day long down the road today. Right, the first thing I'm going to do is look at the depth and mark the depth on here. I'm going to leave a little gap up there, but this is the point where I need to cut the depth for the ferrule on there, like so. And the next thing I'm going to do is measure the inside of the ferrule there, which is just over 19mm, and I'm going to lock off my ferrules, my calipers rather, on there to get that measurement, and I can then use that up here to get the right diameter. You can of course do it by hand and take, if you're turning between centres, take the piece on and off and put it on and off. It shouldn't move. If you've got a one-ended kit, that's a little bit more difficult. There we go, that's quite a nice fit on there, and I can see there's a tiny weeny little gap between the end of the inside of the ferrule and that part there. That's okay, that means it's coming right up to the wood. So now we can look at shaping the handle. Now, I've not done this before. I normally go over to my vise, the other side of the workshop, but that means moving all the cameras. So what I'm going to try and do is assemble this here on this bit of wood. I'm hoping it doesn't jump everywhere. I'm going to start with my end cap, and because my hole was quite small, slightly smaller than the actual thing, I think I can just tap it in. Sorry about the noise, let's get it over the lathe. That's better. Right, there's my end cap in. I'm using a rubber mallet, by the way, in case you didn't realise. The next thing to do is to put the ferrule on, and we're then going to fit the handle in there, and it needs tapping in. And normally what I would do is put that in the vise and tap the handle in. Because I've got my metal end, I'm going to try tapping the blade directly into the handle. I've no idea how it's going to work. Let's have a look. I feel it's going in. The advantage of doing it this way, before I go any further, is that if you want to put glue inside there, you can do, because you're doing it this way up, if that makes sense to you. If you're doing it the other way up, you might get the glue falling out. But let's just mind your fingers. There we go, that has gone all the way home, no problem at all. My rubber mallet is still intact without any problem at all, and that feels a pretty substantial little cleaver. The last thing to do is to warn you that they are very sharp across there. Perhaps we'll take it into the kitchen in a minute and see how it works on something like a tomato. But yeah, there we go. There is the finished large cleaver kit.